Mike Schrader, VP of Operations here at WTL. Just want to share this video with everybody in regards to how to do a walk around. Try to help everybody understand the importance of the walk around. If you have any questions, you can contact the maintenance department. We do the best we can to, share that with everybody so you guys got a safe vehicle to run down the road. Let's do this. Normally what I do is I start out here on the driver's side. I get in a habit of walking around the whole vehicle. And I'll look at the engine components. I'll check my fluids. I'll check my steering shaft. Rotate it back and forth. I'll look at the steering components. Make sure that there's no problems there. Look at hoses. I'll look for leaks. I'll look at the brakes. In this area right here, if there's any wheel seals leaking, look at all this area right here and make sure that everything's okay. Shocks, fuel filter's not leaking, steering gearbox, steering tire. I'll look at, make sure all the lug nuts are tight. Oil in my cap is full and clean. I'll look at the condition of the tire. Look at the windshield, make sure that there's no cracks. Look at this mirror. I'll hit stuff typically just to make sure everything is not loose. And then I'll walk around. I'll have my lights on, check the lights, mirrors here, making sure there's no leaks underneath the vehicle. Look around and do my walk around, checking all these areas. And I'll come over here and I'll check this side, the turbo, the engine for leaks. I'll look at my fan and belt. Typically I'll check my air filter indicator to make sure that that's in good shape. I'll check my fluids in this area for exhaust leaks throughout the whole exhaust system. I'll look at the tire in this area. I'll check the brakes, make sure there's no wheel seals leaking. Look in this area right here, make sure all my hoses are okay. Oil filter is not leaking. Look at this windshield at this point, make sure everything's good there. Again, lug nuts gotta be tight, nothing loose. Oil in the hub. I'll check for cracks on the wheel. Typically you only check half of a tire. If I do a walk around, I'll move the truck 4 feet either way and check the other side of the tires. That way if there's a nail on the bottom, you're gonna catch it. So I continue to walk and look at everything in this area here. Make sure that my flashing guards are all tight. Step. I'll check, make sure the door is working okay. Not loose. Mirror. Check the fuel tank and make sure the fuel tank has no leaks. Make sure that the fuel tank isn't rotating, that it could be loose. The fairing, making sure that it's tight. Another area as we're walking around here and I like to spend some time with, the snow chain brackets. The snow chains will eventually hit the ground and get into the tire and get rolled up. If you can touch them with your foot, they gotta be cinched up. In this area here, again, checking your lights, making sure that there's no leaks on your fuel tank. Quarter fenders, making sure that they're not loose, falling off. I usually inspect the U-bolts on the headache rack. Really important to check the tires in between the tire, the outside the tire, air pressure. It should be checked on every tire. Lug nuts, making sure the lug nuts are all tight. Also, again, no leaks on the hub. And the inside wheel seals, again, brakes. I checked at the brake lining, making sure that they're more than 1/4 of an inch. I always will check for our 90-degree brake adjustment. That's one thing that we've been training is having that 90 degrees. This is the time that you would check your 90-degree brake adjustment. As you see here, we're doing a walk around. Here we got a nail in the tire. So this is why it's so important to check these tires out now. Again, I would move the truck up 3 feet, 4 feet, and then I would check the other half of the tires. Air suspension, making sure that your airbags are in good shape, your shocks, the drive line, everything looks good from the transmission back. All your U-joints, carrier bearing, just doing a visual check on everything. Fifth wheel, but make sure all your fifth wheel bolts are tight and that the fifth wheel is locked. You gotta make sure that these ear tabs are out. So this is another important area to make sure that your fifth wheel is locked. Again, as I'm walking around towards the back, making sure that all lug nuts are tight, no wheels are cracked, tires are in good shape, make sure there's nothing in between. And again, brake assemblies, making sure there's no leaks. Also check the frame rail for bolts, make sure that they're tight throughout the frame rail as I'm walking. In this area here, I would make sure that all the brakes are adjusted. 90-degree rule, brake adjustment right in that area, and all 4 wheels, you make sure they're at a 90-degree with brake supply. Make sure the lights are working. Mud flaps, making sure your mud flaps are on. They have to be able to touch your foot, so the 8 inches off the ground is the spec. look at my tires, suspension, looking for wheel seals leaking, brakes, brake adjustment. And again, looking at the fifth wheel on this side, making sure you have all tight bolts, making sure that the locks are engaged. Suspension, airbags look good. All the side bolts, nothing loose here. Tires, again, at the right air pressure, lug nuts, and no leaks. Quarter fender, making sure it's tight. Again, looking at my brakes, checking the wheel seals, checking for anything on the drive line, looking at throughout the whole running gear. One area right here, glad hands. When you're connected to a trailer, this area is probably the problem that we have with most of our drivers, and they have a situation, they're calling us, is because they had their glad hands too long, hanging down. You cannot have them hanging and touching the catwalk. A lot of times they'll grab a bolt on the frame and they'll rip them off. You always have to continue to adjust your glad hands and your electrical core. Again, just making sure everything is tight, intact, making sure your covers are good, tank, making sure there's no leaks. I usually look underneath the vehicle to make sure there's no leaks, and then I come back towards the driver's side, making sure that the door is in good shape. I usually check batteries and look and make sure all of my battery cables are tight. They shouldn't have corrosion. They should be nice and clean and tight. I usually go ahead and grab the cable and just make sure that they're not loose. And again, checking for step, making sure that everything is tight here. And that's how I do the walk around. So now that we're hooked to a trailer, we'll do a walk around just to make sure it's ready to go. I would start again with all my lights being on. I would check all the lights. This area right here, really an important area. Make sure that your glad hands and your electrical connection is off the catwalk. We'll start and just look at the area, the frame, to make sure that all the bolts are tight on the frame. Make sure that all my landing gear bolts are tight where they connect to the frame of the trailer. Make sure my registration is with the trailer. It's got an annual DOT sticker that's current. I would also make sure that my side reflective tape is in good shape. The toolboxes, really important to make sure that they're fastened to the trailer. Make sure the bolts are tight, getting into it and pushing on and pulling, and just make sure that they're not loosening up. You would also look at, again, the frame here, make sure my light's working, make sure my doors are closed and fastened, make sure the airbags are in good shape, no loose bolts around that area, that my brakes are in good shape at a 90 degree. The wheels, the tires, making sure the tires are in good shape, both of them, inside and out. Make sure that the lug nuts are tight, no leaks on my hub. Mud flaps, again, 8 inches off the ground, toolbox, making sure it's fastened to the trailer again. Tires, checking those tires. Just looking inside the tires, the back side of them. They get cut, rocks, mud flap. Lights are all on, working. Making sure the license plate lights working. Tail lights, reflective tape, mud flaps. Looking at my brakes, I can see my brake shoes. I can see the brake 90 degree angle. I'm looking at my air suspension, airbags, making sure that there's no cracks in them and that they're in good shape. And again, the brake shoes, wheel seals, looking at these tires, there's no side cuts, they're in good shape. Air pressure, making sure all my lug nuts are tight. Frame rail, toolboxes that are secured, no loose bolts, nuts, doors are closed, locked. Another mud flap to look at, fasteners to look at. Just inspecting everything, making sure that I'm looking at the brakes, lug nuts, make sure there's no cracks on the wheels. Big. On my front axle, I have my dunnage rack, making sure that everything is secured in the dunnage rack, make sure there's no cracks on it. And again, just looking at everything, make sure my lights work, landing gear is out, and giving it a really good inspection just to make sure that nothing's coming loose, nothing's cracked and broken, leaking, air leaks. I just wanted to add, when you're inspecting your brakes on the trailers, that the rear ones in some trailers, you can visually see the brake shoes, the 90 degree from the rear of the trailer. On this front axle, you have to go underneath and take a look at your shoes, any grease seals leaking, brake adjustment. You have to really, I like to try to get underneath the trailer and actually take a look at it, and also look at my suspension. If there's a problem developing or a brake out of adjustment, That's the only way you're gonna see it. After we did our walk around on the outside, typically what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll make sure my city horn, air horn works. I'll check to make sure all my gauges and switches on the dashboard. I'll conduct a air brake test. That's the part that I think drivers struggle with at times, so I'm going to just demonstrate it, so hopefully that helps. So what I normally do is I'll air the truck up to 120 pounds, or when the air dryer spits, go ahead and shut the vehicle off. Turn the key back on, so your gauges will now read. Once I got my indicator, my gauges are up. You can see I'm holding just a little over 100 pounds of air pressure. I'll watch that for 30 seconds to a minute just to make sure that the gauges hold that air pressure. I'm going to test two systems. I'm going to test the parking brake system, which is red, and the service system, which is blue. And it's so important that you test them the way I show you. I'm going to test the parking brake system first. In this case, it's a yellow button. It doesn't matter if it's yellow, red. It's just basically they're all parking brakes. As soon as I push it in, I am now releasing my brakes. The gauges will now go down to 100 pounds, as you can see, and they're maintaining at 100. As long as the gauges stay at that pressure, that I have no leaks on the emergency side, which is the parking brake side. I will now go ahead and test the service system by pushing down as hard as I can on the service brake. And now I will look at my gauges, make sure that there's no air pressure loss. They're holding pressure, no leaks detected, so I'll release, and then I will pump down my air system to check the low air warning device. It just came on, and it's at 90 pounds. That test is completed. And the last test, I'll go ahead and the button, I will pump it down, and the parking brake service button for parking brake should pop out, as it did. You should have around 30 PSI, which we do. This test is passed, and that's the way you conduct your air test.